This morning I'd like to talk to you about how good our God is all the time. And I want to share with you a little about my life and the goodness of God, starting from the mess version. Hopefully along the way you'll pick up the message version. Coming from a dysfunctional family in childhood, I grew up believing a lie. The lie that I was worthless, useless and ugly. I felt unloved and unlovable. These lies formed who I was for many years. When I was 16, I hated myself so much that I took an overdose of pills. I wanted to die, but I couldn't even get that right. I moved out of home and went to nightclubs several times a week, not knowing where I would end up or where I would wake up the next day. I was looking for love in all the wrong places. I slept on friends' couches, and for a time I was homeless. Friends introduced me to drugs. I was always against drugs, yet here I was using them. I was hopeless and I was lost. I slashed my wrists thinking that the pain would end, but it didn't. All I ever wanted to be when I grew up was a mum. I can remember saying to a family friend when I was about 12 that I'd have 6 kids one day, and she believed me. She said that I would. I was 18 and had to have surgery for some issues that I had. 3 different doctors told me that I would never be able to have any children at all. I was useless. I was staying with a friend while I recovered from surgery, and she took me to an AFL game to watch her fiancé play one day. That's where I met my knight in shining armour. Although I didn't realise it at the time, I was too busy trying to get my head around the fact that we had been set up, a blind date. People say it was love at first sight for him. It wasn't for me. All I could think of was, how could he even like me? He's way too nice for me and way too good. I wasn't worth to have anything to have him be so good to me. You see, that's the lie that Satan wants us all to believe. He's a thief, a liar, and all he wants to do is destroy lives. And he will never give up, but I'll never give up either. So I tried to brush Mike off, but he stalked me. He didn't go away. Needless to say, here we are 26 years later. And now I realise he is my knight in shining armour. We went to see a specialist, and several surgeries later, he told us that time would tell if they were successful. 8 weeks later, I was pregnant with our first daughter. At my 6-week postpartum checkup, I was diagnosed with postnatal depression. I was prescribed antidepressants, but I didn't take them. By the time I was 6 months pregnant with our second daughter, and almost 3 years later, I was sinking further into darkness, even though I had really good things happening in my life. I was booked into the postnatal depression unit of a private psychiatric hospital. This would become my second home for the next 7.5 years. By the way, my son told me last night, no crying, Mum. I can't promise that. Our 4th child and second son was born, and I was getting worse. The doctors told Mike there was no hope for me. The medication wasn't working anymore. We lost everything that we owned because all of my medical expenses were private and we didn't have private health cover. Mike had to give up his job as a builder to become my carer and that of the kids. We moved to the country to change our lifestyle, to live a more simplistic life. My goal for each day was just to get out of bed. No hope for Paula. That's what the doctors said. Our marriage was long suffering, and they booked me in for electric shock treatment as a last resort. Mike's words were, and I can remember them, he was a dead man walking. I wanted to kill myself every other day. I wanted to die. Or so I thought. I didn't really. I wanted the pain to die. Postnatal depression is often called the smiling depression because if you have visitors over or when you're out and about and people say, "Hi, how you going? How's everything?" and you smile at them and say, "Great, everything's fabulous." And then you get home and you shut the door and cry your eyes out, thinking what the heck is wrong with you. So some days I became really super good at faking it. But I was always paranoid. Paranoid that everybody would know that I had postnatal depression and that I was crazy. I didn't make phone calls and I rarely went anywhere on my own because of the paranoia. But one day I decided to go down to the shop just down the road from us. On the way back, a lady was walking along the side of the road, and I can remember it so clearly. It was a really hot day, and there was a hill kind of really steep. So I stopped and pulled over and said, "Would you like a lift?" I've got no idea why I did that, but God had plans. She jumped in the car, looked at me, and said, "The pastors of our church are marriage counsellors if you're interested." I looked at her and said, "Sorry?" She repeated what she said, and I said, "Well, give me the number." I didn't know her from a bar of soap, but God did. He had plans. When I got home, I told Mike, and he said, "Well, if you want them to come, you make the call," secretly thinking I would never make the call. But I did, and as I was dialing, he yelled out, "And tell them we don't want to be Bible bashed." So I did. And she said to me, "Well, we will quote scriptures from the Bible because we're Christians." I was cool with that because I was a Catholic and I grew up as a Catholic. Went to a Catholic school, so I did know a little bit about the Bible and Jesus. But Mike grew up with no knowledge at all of the Bible or Jesus. And I chose not to tell him about the scriptures until right before they were due to turn up. So I said, "Oh, by the way, they're going to quote scriptures from the Bible." He says, "Oh, great, what's Jonah and the bleeping whale got to do with our marriage problems?" It was the only Bible story he knew. But I can tell you right now, the word he used was far more offensive than bleeping. The pastors came, and as soon as I heard those first scriptures, I knew that that was the answer that I was searching for my whole life. Mike was sceptical. "What if it's a cult?" he said. "What if it's not?" I said. "We've got nothing to lose, but everything to gain." They came 3 times. On the 3rd time, we became Christians. We said a prayer. The pastors prayed for my healing from the depression. It was late at night. When I woke up the next morning, I felt completely different. It's really hard to describe, but it really did feel like I was born again. I felt brand new. I threw my medication in the bin, by the way. And that was 18 years ago. I was in darkness, but now I'm in light. How could I not choose him when he chose me in all my ugly brokenness? We dedicated our lives to Christ. We both got jobs, and with God's help, we slowly built up everything that we had lost. Or should I say the devil stole. One day Mike had asked God how long it would be until we got everything back that the devil took. His answer was clear. As long as it took for the devil to steal everything, that's how long it will take to get it back. And sure enough, 7.5 years to the day, we bought our own home again. We watched in awe God renew and restore everything that we had lost. The last thing I lost was motherhood, as I couldn't fully care for my babies, and I don't remember the babyhoods. But God wasn't finished yet. He gave me a promise of another baby. I didn't tell anyone about the promise, but randomly people started giving me baby things, people from church. I ended up with like 3 bathtubs and a couple of prams and so much stuff, more than I would ever need. And I really couldn't believe it, but I took it as confirmation that God was working on his promise. I set up an entire nursery, crazy lady, but I did it as an act of faith, and I actually didn't care what people thought. The Bible says faith without action is dead, so I just felt I was being obedient to God. Long story short, after 5 long years of waiting on his promise, never giving up hope, in February 2008, a little miracle baby boy came into our hearts. He was 40 hours old, and his name was Malachi. Sorry, Alex. His name means God's messenger. 16 months later, in 2009, in July, I picked up his baby brother from hospital. He was just 15 hours old. His name was Lucas, meaning life-giving. And I can tell you that we didn't name those children. They came to us with those names already given to them. There's just no doubt in my mind how real God is. That's not a coincidence. God chose me, and he chooses you. He created your inmost being. He knit you in your mother's womb, and you are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are worthy, and you are priceless. I look back over my life, and I can clearly see God's hand choosing me. The time when a stranger grabbed me from behind a toilet block at a park as I pushed my bike across it when I was 11, and the lady who heard my screams and stopped to rescue me. The times when I was homeless, yet was protected. The times I went home with strangers, not knowing where I was going, but was able to leave the next day unharmed. The times I hitchhiked to the Gold Coast from Brisbane City at stupid o'clock. The time I hitchhiked 660 kilometres from Tennant Creek in the Northern Territory to Mount Isa in Queensland. Remembering back years later, the guy that picked me up took me the whole way. He had a Jesus sticker on his car, and he even gave me money to make sure I got the train back to Brisbane safely. All the times I tried to kill myself, unsuccessfully. All the time I was told I would never have children, and now I have 6. The time the doctor told Mike there was no hope for me, yet here I am. And I could go on. We can be a victim or a victor. It's our choice. We can blame things on our parents, the way we were brought up, our friends, our boss, etc. But here's the thing. You are responsible for your life. You have the power and the choice to break the chains that bind your past. You alone are responsible for your life and the choices you make. God gave you that free will. But choosing to trust God is a journey. We all have that default setting. You know the one when you're born and you're programmed with it. Events from your past and childhood forming your mindset. Sometimes that mindset can be toxic and unhealthy. When faced with adversity and challenges, it's only natural to fall back to your old default setting. But you can train your brain to have a different setting, a different mindset, a God set. Start declaring God's truth over your life and watch it change. Practice makes perfect, they say. Try it, it works. Do I still go back to my toxic default setting? Sure I do, but just not as often as I used to. The more I seek what God says about me in my life and every situation in it, the more often I reset my mind. John 16:33 says, I have told you these things so that you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. The thing is, we will never have a problem-free, perfect life, but we do have a problem-free, perfect God that we can trust in. Psalm 112, 4-7 says, "Even in darkness, light dawns for the upright, for those who are gracious and compassionate and righteous. Good will come to those who are generous and lend freely, who conduct their affairs with justice. Surely the righteous will never be shaken. They will be remembered forever. They will have no fear of bad news, their hearts steadfast, trusting in the Lord." I choose Him. I choose God. He will never forsake me. He will never leave me. The bigger the trial, the more I trust Him. I have faith in Him, and I don't need to have a big mountainous faith either. But His word says I only need the faith of a mustard seed. Matthew 17:20 says, "Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing is impossible for you." For the past 6 years, I've been on a new journey with God, trusting Him and sowing mustard seeds here, there and everywhere. Malachi and Lucas have autism, for those of you that don't already know that. And autism is basically a difference in how our brains make connections. Autistic brains make some kinds of connections more quickly and easily than neurotypical brains do. And autistic brains make some kinds of connections more slowly and reluctantly than neurotypical brains do. It's not a disability, it's a different ability. It's where hearts melt and hearts break on a daily basis, sometimes at the same time. I could talk about autism until Jesus comes back, but I don't have time for that today. I'm passionate about creating awareness and, more importantly, acceptance. What I do know is that God has great plans. I just want to say I'd be lost without God in my life, directing me, shaping me, guiding me in every area. In fact, there's no doubt in my mind that I'd be dead. 18 years ago, I invited Jesus into my life. He saved me, healed me, and restored me. You can invite Him into your life too, today. He can save you, heal you, and restore you. And I can guarantee you will never be the same if you choose to walk with Him. Thank you.